Here.
Here.
Thank you, Roberta. There is a quorum present, so I will call this meeting of the House Judiciary Committee together. The first item on our calendar this evening is 6126 by Representative Baldelli-Hunt that would allow bingo in senior citizen centers, obtaining a permit first from the Division of State Police that would allow bingo 5 days a week. The top pot would be $400 a day. There would be no bingo on Sundays in senior citizen centers. Is there a motion from the committee?
So moved. I'll move passage.
Representative Walsh moves passage of 6126. That motion is seconded by Representative Canario. Is there discussion on 6126? There being none, all in favor of the motion for passage of 6126 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries unanimously. From Senator Jabour, we have Senate Bill 95, which would remove the requirement of notifying the Executive Office of Health and Human Services when a decedent is 55 years or older when petitioning for the probate of a will or administration of an estate. I believe that's duplicate legislation with Representative Lally, whose bill we passed last week. Is there? Representative Martin moves passage of Senate Bill 95. That motion is seconded by Representative Walsh. Is there discussion on Senate Bill 95? There being none, all in favor of the motion for passage of Senate Bill 95 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. From Senator McCaffrey, we have Senate Bill 489, an act relating to motor and other vehicles. Adjudication of traffic offenses would provide for the expungement of alcohol-related offenses after 5 years. That's lengthening the wait for expungement from the current 3. We passed similar legislation sponsored by Representative Mattiello, Leader Mattiello, I believe. Is there a motion on 489?
So moved.
Representative Shikarchi moves passage of 489. That motion is seconded by Representative Walsh. Is there discussion on Senate Bill 489? There being none, all in favor of the motion for passage of 489 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. And Senate Bill 658 by Senator McCaffrey deals with correctional institutions and parole. I believe it is duplicate legislation introduced by Representative Jackard that would pass dealing with the parole board's authority over individuals on parole in Rhode Island, that parole having begun in another state, and the authority to arrest them and incarcerate them. Representative Martin moves passage of Senate Bill 658, and that motion is seconded by Representative Shikarchi. All in favor of the motion for passage signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries for passage of 658. And Senate Bill 661 by Senator Felag is, I believe, duplicate legislation. If someone could remind me. 661. All right. I'll find it. It 661 is duplicate legislation of legislation we passed over under Representative Johnston's name, dealing with divided highways where there is no pavement between the lanes north and south or east and west.
Move passage.
Representative Martin moves passage of 661. That motion is seconded by Representative Shikarchi. All discussion on 661? There being none, all in favor of the motion for passage of 661 from the Senate signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 661 passes unanimously. We have on our calendar two solemnization of marriages bills. Senate Bill 911 by Senator Sosnowski, Senate Bill 912 by Senator Kettle, Senate Bill 6165 by Representative Tanzi, Senate Bill 6166 by Representative Ferry, House Bill 6176 by Representative Ruggiero, and House Bill 6182 by Representative Serpa. Representative Martin moves to bundle those six solemnization of marriage bills. That motion is seconded by Representative Canario. All in favor of the motion for bundling signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Representative Martin moves. Representative Shikarchi seconds. Motion for passage of the bundle of six solemnization of marriage bills. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I look forward to
The
the
motion.
Madam Chair when your bill on the repeal of the Solemnization Act passes the House and the Senate.
Thank you, Representative Marcello. I do
Oh, there's
too.
enough sugar on here to make
I do
it take
too.
one.
So the bundle of six solemnization of marriage bills passes. We have on our calendar remaining 6143 by Representative Keeble, 6160 by Representative Valencia, 6181 by 6169 by Representative Guthrie, and 6181 by Representative Lombardi. Representative Martin moves that we hold all remaining bills on our calendar for further study. That motion is seconded by Representative Lally. All in favor of the motion to hold all remaining bills on our calendar for further study signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. And we will move first to,
I'll do the gun bill, give it the crowd over here.
no, do the other ones first.
I have two bills before House Finance, which I need to leave to go testify for, but I will be back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing you again, and good luck.
What do you got to get rid of?
I'm going to wait till Keeble's here for this bill.
Okay.
But we'll keep,
With the gun bill, you get rid of all the
Representative Lombardi, no, we're going to take him first. 6181.
people. Oh, yeah,
Representative Lombardi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is pursuant to some conversations that I had with several individuals in law enforcement, but more people in social services and even the medical community, asking that any and all police officers, strike that, sorry, provide instruction for police officers and trainees in identifying, responding to, handling, investigating, and reporting all incidents involving any person with a developmental disability. Madam Chair, members of the committee, especially in the minority communities and in the poorest sections of the cities in towns throughout the state of Rhode Island, oftentimes there may be some developmental issues, some psychological issues. Couple that with alcohol or drugs or something else. Sometimes it gets misconstrued as resisting arrest, violent behavior. We've had some incidents over the past couple of years. I'm sure you recall the one in West Warwick, where a gentleman was smoking behind a sign. There was a confrontation with the police. We later found out that that individual had some issues that we had to deal with. Believe it or not, that happens in Providence more than you can imagine. I can only speak for Providence. I will not speak for other cities and towns. And I just think it's a good bill for certainly the trainees, the individuals that are the rookies. But I think it really needs to be done on an ongoing basis because as time goes by, we're seeing more and more that there are more and more issues that people are not aware of. I think it's a good bill to keep the police department informed, educated. And I know several police officers. I've worked with them, many different chiefs and individual officers that truly care about this issue. And I think if they have the ability to train their recruits and their police officers, I think it makes their job a little easier in identifying some of these problems, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for affording me this opportunity.
Thank you, Representative Lombardi. Representative Walsh has a question.
Would this apply to current police officers or just for trainees?
No, I think it should be on an ongoing basis, Representative. Again, Asperger's, that's something that, became front and center recently. Not that this is related, what happened to PPAC the other evening. I mean, these issues are coming at us fast and furious, and I think we all need to be aware, but certainly the police, because in many instances they're making health, safety, and welfare issues almost every instance, and they need to be armed and able to identify those issues that could be life-saving in some instances and, maybe helpful in another instance.
Well, no, I think it's a good idea, but I'm not sure it applies to current police officers when you say curricula for recruits and in-service trainees in all police academies. So I would hope that our current police force would also be trained in this, but I'm not so sure I see it.
That'd be an excellent amendment, and I would certainly support that.
Okay.
How's that?
That's good.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, if there's no further questions.
Thank you, Representative Lombardi.
Thank you very much.
There appear not to be any other questions for you. Thank
Made
you.
it easy for me. Thank you.
Chief Anthony Passari? Police Officers Commission on Training and Standards.
Good evening, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to address you on H6181. I am the Chief of Police in Middletown. I am also the Chairman of the Police Officers Commission on Standards and Training. Although we oppose this bill as presently written, we embrace the idea behind it, and I would like, if I have this opportunity, to explain to you exactly what we're doing in this regard. I think the first thing that's vitally important for you to realize is that the Police Officers Commission on Standards and Trainings only has jurisdiction over the Municipal Police Academy. We have no jurisdiction over the Providence Police Academy or the State Police Academy. So this bill, even if passed, we would not be able to dictate to those two academies how they train their recruits. But let me say this. Each recruit in the Rhode Island Municipal Police Academy for the past 4 years has received an 8-hour block of training in responding to issues of people with developmental disabilities. So we are training our officers. Each recruit who graduates from the Municipal Police Academy has received at least 8 hours in training on how to handle these situations. In addition, and we've been doing that for 4 years. In addition, we sponsor a series of in-service training for officers throughout the state in responding to individuals with mental health issues, suicides, all kinds of mental health issues that a police officer would run into. Also, no matter what police department we're talking about, state, local, or municipal, there are presently 8 police agencies in the state of Rhode Island that are CALEA accredited. That's a national accreditation society which sets national standards. Each one of those 8 police departments in the state of Rhode Island has to adhere to a training in-service program for people with developmental disabilities. So police departments, those 8 police departments already have standards in place for training, in-service training, and responding to these situations. In addition to those 8 agencies, 41 police agencies in the state of Rhode Island belong to the in-state accreditation program. That in-state accreditation program has the same standards, which require training and in-service training for all of its police officers, mandatory to be done within 3 years to address these issues. So overall, the post, although it has limited jurisdiction over training academy, does sponsor in-service training for state troopers and city police officers. In addition, as I said, we have been adhering to a training block of 8 hours in the municipal academy, which has been going on for 4 years to address this. So I applaud the initiative of this legislation, but I wanted you to be aware that we are doing that right now, and that also I think it's vitally important for you to understand that statutorily, when the Department of Public Safety was formed, they placed the post under the Department of Public Safety. So technically, we answer to the Superintendent of State Police. So we cannot dictate the curriculum of the State Police Academy or the Providence Police Academy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Questions? You mentioned 8 agencies. Can you... Which are they? Or maybe
I know
you
that
can't remember.
I can't remember all 8, but Warwick, Bristol, Cumberland, Smithfield. I know Providence has applied for it, Middletown has applied for it, and there are several others that escape me. So they're nationally accredited, but the rest of the police departments, with the exception of one, I believe, have signed up for the in-state accreditation program, which takes the CALEA standards as a model and applies it to the local police agencies. So once they all of them have joined, within 3 years they'll be certified under the in-state accreditation program, and they will adhere to that same kind of standard, which again requires training to deal with these issues and requires that that training be kept up within 3 years, or they risk their certification.
And Providence is in that process?
Providence is in the CALEA process right now. Correct.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
That concludes testimony on 6181, and we will move to Representative Keeble's legislation, 6143. Representative Keeble.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. This piece of legislation would add Rhode Island to the list of states that have ratified the 17th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which was adopted in 1913, less than 1 year after having been passed by 2/3 of Congress. This came on the heels of failed efforts in 1828, 1829, 1855, and throughout the 1890s and the first decade of the 20th century. It came from a sense that the United States Senate, which up until that time was elected by state legislatures, were detached from the people. And 2 major issues were cited. One, there was unfortunately rampant corruption in the state legislatures. In 1900, William Clark had his selection voided by the U.S. Senate in Montana. There were reports of members of the Montana legislature leaving the floor with envelopes of cash. There was also issues of deadlock, and this is really the bigger issue. I don't think people realize why the 17th Amendment was necessary. Between 1891 and 1905, there were 46 Senate elections that were deadlocked in the legislatures where they couldn't get a Senate. So you actually had situations where states were missing representation in the United States Senate because they couldn't get any name through the state legislature. So, for example, in Delaware, a Senate seat went vacant for 4 years before they could elect somebody. And in 1897, 1/3 of the Oregon House of Representatives refused to take their oath of office over a Senate dispute. And no legislation was passed that year in Oregon. Rhode Island is the only New England state that has not ratified the 17th Amendment. And there is a renewed modern push to do this, so it is relevant. In 2010, Delaware ratified it, and in 2012, Maryland ratified it. So that's the history of how this piece of legislation comes before you. I'd like to thank Sam Ackerman, who's the son of Representative Meir Ackerman, for bringing this issue forward in Rhode Island. He's done a great job educating myself on this, and I think he's signed up to testify in a little while, Madam Chairman. I'll answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Representative Keeble, are there questions for the sponsor? There being none, Sam Ackerman.
Hello. I would like to thank the honorable members of the House Judiciary Committee for considering this progressive piece of legislation. Also, I would like to sincerely give my gratitude to Representative Keeble, who has graciously adopted this legislation following my research into the matter and subsequent request for legislative action. I stand here today to express my unwavering support for House Bill 6143, which would make Rhode Island the 41st state to ratify the 17th Amendment to the Constitution. Exactly 100 years and 5 days ago, on May 31st, 1913, the 17th Amendment was ratified amidst an era of progressive reforms that helped to empower the common citizen. Upon implementation, 37 of the 48 states in existence at the time had ratified the amendment. However, during the ratification process, Rhode Island was one of the sole dissenting states. Now, on its 100th anniversary, is an ideal opportunity for Rhode Island to ratify this amendment and rectify a mistake made 100 years ago. It might seem peculiar to ratify an amendment so many years past its original context. However, such a practice is not unprecedented and serves an imperative symbolic purpose. For example, just 1 year ago, Maryland ratified the amendment to become the 40th state, and 3 years prior, Delaware did as well. The reason that these states ratified the amendment outside of its original context is that they recognized that their states could not be defined by the regressive forces that originally forestalled ratification. Rather, they recognized that ratifying this amendment serves as a necessary symbol for their commitment to expanding our nation's democratic institutions. I believe that Rhode Island, too, with its unique history of progressiveness starting from the moment that Roger Williams set foot on Providence, shares the values of the reformers who conceived this amendment. As the course of American history has unfolded, we have discovered that the best way to ensure a fair, honest government is to make the government report directly to the people. This does not mean a select elite of people, nor does it mean that only one of our legislative bodies should report to the people. It means that the only way to ensure that legislation is motivated solely by ameliorating the lives of the American people is to give the masses the power to directly vote for their legislators. These are the ideals of the 17th Amendment. These are the ideals that make America great, and these are the ideals that are warmly welcomed here in Rhode Island. With this, I strongly urge passage of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Well done. Are there questions for Mr. Ackerman from the committee? Representative Almeida, a question?
Yeah, not a question, just a statement. It's good to look in somebody's young eyes and take over our spot someday. Welcome aboard.
Well done. Very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not too soon, though, right? What grade are you in school?
I'm a junior.
A junior.
What school?
Cumberland High School.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Thank you for your time.
Well done. Come again. John Marion from Common Cause.
Tough act to follow. Thank you very much. I'm John Marion from Common Cause. I often say our organization is about open, ethical, and accountable government. The second half of our mission talks about we try to achieve those goals by promoting representative democracy. And that's really what this is about creating a representative democracy by direct election of senators. So I won't take much of your time, just to say that we support the 17th Amendment that last week, in fact, May 31st, was the 100th anniversary of. And we just want to point out that we think it's the best way to hold our U.S. senators accountable is directly instead of the indirect method through the state legislature. And we see a lot of negative consequences if it went back to a period where the state legislature. Representative Keeble talked about the deadlock that would occur in some state legislatures. We also know that U.S. senators might get more involved in the gerrymandering of legislative districts, and that might not be a good thing. We're afraid, and there was evidence in the past that state legislative elections became nationalized in a sense, that people who were concerned about influencing the U.S. Senate tried to influence the state legislature in their selections. And finally, we've come a long way in 100 years in our campaign finance system, and you've heard us, Common Cause, talk about how broken it is, but we think it would be even worse if the money that is now flooding our congressional elections were instead flooding your elections. Well, one of the nice things about Rhode Island is it doesn't take much to win a race financially in the state legislature, and it would be a shame if large amounts of outside money were being spent just to influence your vote for a U.S. Senate seat. So for all those reasons and many more, we support the 17th Amendment.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Marion? Representative Almeida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, John, this is not just a symbolic vote.
No, especially given, and I think if this does make it to the floor, you'll hear from one or more of your colleagues who actually oppose the 17th Amendment and think it should be repealed. There is a lot of literature out there and many arguments being made that we should do away with the 17th Amendment. So I think taking an affirmative step is not a bad idea in that climate.
Okay, John. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That will conclude testimony on House Bill 6143, and we will move to Representative Guthrie's legislation 6169. Representative Guthrie. Representative Guthrie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Last week we passed legislation on the House side as part of the economic package where we would no longer force businesses to pay hourly wages weekly. They wanted to move it to biweekly or twice a month. I offered an amendment, and that amendment would have been that if a tenant that pays rent on a weekly basis can prove to his landlord that he's paid biweekly, he should be able to pay his rent biweekly. Oftentimes we pass legislation in this room or in this building, and it goes out into the cities and towns, and we expect people to just adjust to things that we do. Sometimes that doesn't happen. My fear is that what we're doing is we're creating a policy, and we're changing the lives of people out there that probably have lived that life, their entire lives. They shop mostly at the local convenience store because they have no transportation to go to a larger market to save money. So they spend more in the economy quicker than anybody else. So I just think that if a person can prove to their tenant, to their landlord that they can't afford to pay on a weekly basis, then we should enact that as a bill. So what I did is I put in the amendment, but I also had a bill drawn at the same time. The Speaker reluctantly didn't want to pass the amendment, but he did suggest that I put it in a bill. I did so, and I had a conversation with him, and he said he would like to get a quick hearing on it, so here we are. So I just think it's a common sense bill. It says that if you get paid every 2 weeks, you pay your rent every 2 weeks if you're required by your employer to be paid every 2 weeks, because it's not a law that mandates it. It's a law that offers businesses to pay their employees every 2 weeks. So with that, if you have any questions.
Are there questions from the committee? Representative Shikarchi?
Just one second. Would you have any problem with an amendment that exempts housing authorities? Because I don't think it would apply to housing authorities, because housing authorities are, for the most part, federally regulated. But that's my only concern I can see with the bill, that if somebody was paying, paying their rent either weekly or monthly or whatever right now, and then says because of the new law my employer changed how I get paid, I may have to change that. And that could be a hardship on the housing authority, which, as we know, provides low-income housing for elderly and disabled people.
I understand that. I can do some research on it, and if it fits, it fits.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Representative Almeida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Scott, what was your amendment again? Could you explain it again?
My amendment was that if a tenant collects rent from, if a tenant is required to pay a weekly rent My amendment would say that if that tenant can prove to the landlord that he's not paid weekly, he's paid bi-weekly, he cannot be forced to pay his rent weekly. He could end up falling into a cycle of where it snowballs and he'll never be able to catch up. So, you know, the landlord would probably have to fight even harder to get the guy back on schedule. So if we put it in the law now, before we send it out to the public, then I think it's just a good bill. It's government working for the poor guy out there that needs to pay his bills, and he needs to pay them on time. But we have to give him the opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Guthrie, Monica's staff of the Rhode Island Association of Realtors is not able to be here this evening, but she sent a one-page letter with some comments and concerns. One of them is that this legislation could create a new form of rental that is not recognized elsewhere in the Residential Landlord-Tenant Act, which is Rhode Island General Laws 34-18-15. 34-18-15D states, unless the rental agreement fixes a definite term, the tenancy is week to week in case of a roomer who pays weekly rent, and in all other cases, month to month. That's quoting Rhode Island general law. So it would seem that in order to do this, we would have to change that portion of our law.
Then so be it. But like I said, we don't even know if the biweekly pay bill is going to get out of the Senate. So this is us acting acting on behalf of people that may be hurt by us passing, the biweekly pay.
Mm-hmm. But we should look at the details, that we don't have conflicting statutes any more than...
That's how it came up for Ledge Council.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for Representative Guthrie?
Just one question.
Representative Almeida?
Housing is like, doesn't housing,
Housing authorities.
Housing authorities, excuse me.
I'm not sure the bill would apply because they're federally regulated and federally funded. But I just don't know if the bill, some people may interpret it, some judge may interpret the bill and may change a payment formula with the housing authority. And housing authority, as you know, provides subsidized low-income housing for disabled people and elderly people. So I don't want to do anything that would hurt them the most. I'm not saying that's Representative Guthrie's intent at all. I'm just saying that maybe we should look at it and make sure it doesn't affect housing authorities. That's all. That's really my comment more than anything.
Oh, no worries. So, but the housing authority, don't some of the tenants already sometimes have to do every 2 weeks?
It depends. Most of the time it's on a monthly thing, but in some cases, Joe, at the housing authority, people stay for zero rent, and they actually receive a subsidy for utilities. It's all based on a federal formula. So I don't think that anything that we as the General Assembly would do would change that. Correct. But I'm not 100% sure, and I'm just saying maybe we should just look at that so it doesn't hurt housing authorities. Other than that, I think Representative Guthrie's intent is a very good one. He doesn't want to hurt the people who can't make a rental payment on a weekly basis. Some people pay weekly, and because they get paid weekly. Now, if they're not going to pay them weekly, how are they going to pay their rent? So I can understand where Representative Guthrie's going, but I just want to make sure that the housing authorities, we don't do anything inadvertently that somebody could interpret that would hurt elderly or people of low-income people who are residents in housing authority subsidized units.
I understand that. I was just looking at the formula. That's what I was trying to figure out.
It's different. It's based on income, age, disability. There's a whole menu of different options when you go into a housing authority.
Correct.
It's based on your income. It's based on your assets. It's based if you're disabled. It's based on a bunch of things, Joe.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Representative Shikarchi, would you do some research for the committee on how that works with housing authorities and get back to us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Representative Guthrie. Lynette Boiselle, Rhode Island Mortgage Bankers Association. Mademoiselle signed up in opposition to this legislation. She does not seem to be here. Perhaps she will submit written comments. I don't see any. That will conclude testimony on Representative Guthrie's Bill 6169, and we will move to Representative Valencia's Bill 6160. Representative Valencia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, honored members of House Judiciary. I'm introducing House Bill 6160, which alters the definition for licensing authorities within Section 1147(2). Deletes references to the town clerk and the town sergeant. When this legislation was first written, there were many more rural towns around the state which did not have a police chief. So it made some sense to set up a system for handling that. But now that all the other 38 cities and towns have police chief or police commissioner, Exeter is the only town where this requirement still applies. You have a resolution in your hands from the town of Exeter that passed 4-1. You have letters in support from the 4 yes votes, Council President Arlene Hicks and Councilman Monahan, Johnson, and Ellis. And I put this bill in at their request. The intent of this bill is to allow the Attorney General to issue permits until such time, if ever, as the town of Exeter gets its own police department and police chief. So I'm looking at it as a stopgap measure, not something that's going to be going on in perpetuity. I'm happy to entertain any changes in language, which will clarify that. At heart, this is simply a town bill put in for the town of Exeter at their request. And I urge you strongly that you support it. And at this time, I will be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Representative Canario, a question?
So Exeter doesn't have a police chief right now?
Exeter does not have a police chief. So the way the definition is written, in the event that you don't have a police chief or a police commissioner, then the licensing authority is the town clerk with the advice and consent of the town sergeant.
My next question would be, okay, if there's no police chief to issue the license and it's the town clerk therefore probably has no means to run any check or has any way of checking on this person applying for the gun permit?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I know that there is a process set up where a background check is run. I don't believe it's the same process that is used by police chiefs, and I don't believe it's the same process used by the Attorney General. But I'm not going to speak to that because I'm not an expert on it.
And again, this is, to clarify, this is specifically just for Exeter.
Only applies to Exeter is the way this change is intended. And if it's not clear enough the way it's written, I'm happy to make that clarification. As you'll notice, the Exeter Town Council had proposed a certain type of wording which specifically mentioned the Attorney General's oversight. I had written it in a more general fashion, the same way I'd introduced it last year, because a lot of people have been spreading the rumor that this bill was put in as a response to Sandy Hook, and obviously I put this bill in last year long before there were any problems in Connecticut. So I think it's good written the way it is. The way that I drafted it was taking into mind that eventually there would be a police chief in Exeter. We wouldn't have to go back. But I've talked to some people, and they think that there's other ways we could word it to make it clearer.
Okay.
So
Thank you,
I'm open to that, Representative Canario. Thank you for your question.
Representative Costa, a question?
A couple, please. Thank you. Thank you for testifying, Representative. And I will elaborate that this was put in before Sandy Hook. So if anybody does have any questions about that, you were spot on with that, sir. Do you know how many concealed CCW permits were passed out in the town of Exeter?
No, I don't.
Well, there was only 12.
Just a few. Pardon?
There was 12.
Okay.
And we've got people from the town of Exeter here that will actually tell you the process, and it's quite extensive. It's almost like you're applying at the Attorney General's office, if not more extensive. So, and have you known of any issues, any problems with the 12 concealed carry permits that were given out?
No, Representative Costa, I'm not aware of any problems.
Right, sir, because there wasn't any problems. And I do realize...
I never stated that there were.
Right, no, I'm just saying. Now, I do understand that you did put this on request in on behalf of the town council.
Yes.
I was also asked to put this in and I refused. Just because the town council does ask you to do something, if you don't approve of it, doesn't mean that you have to. So, but...
I didn't say that I didn't. I didn't say that I didn't.
Is this testimony or is the question
Oh, I'm
for the
sorry.
sponsor?
It's a little testimony in both, so I am over 7 because that's part of my testimony, and I apologize. So I will testify after.
Questions for the
My fault.
sponsor? Representative Almeida? Representative Martin?
Thank you for your testimony. What's the current configuration of the police department in Exeter? What do they have?
We have a police sergeant and we have a deputy to that police sergeant.
How many people on the police force?
2.
Does the state
The actual police authority in the town of Exeter is the state police. And if you're, unfortunately, Judiciary did not hear this bill last year. Last year, this bill was before House Municipal Government. So you didn't hear the testimony from that last year, unfortunately.
I heard it last year because I was over on that committee last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Costa?
Did raise a good point. Why is that here and not in municipal government?
I can't answer the question. It was sent to Judiciary Committee. Perhaps because it deals with
the firearms?
With firearms legislation.
Okay.
I could take a whack at that, Madam Chair, and I would think that because we did the gun legislation package through House Judiciary, it only made sense for this bill to also be heard, because some of the testimony that you heard related to approval rates by the Attorney General and approval rates at the local level, you've already heard that testimony, so.
We have.
Yes.
We have. Representative Walsh, a question?
All towns do have shall issue permits.
Yes.
And this then makes Exeter a May permit from the Attorney General, because the Attorney General only has May in his...
Right.
Have you talked to him about making Exeter, in his going to the Attorney General and making this a shall issue? Because that's what Exeter had before.
Well, thank you for your question, Representative Walsh. And as you know, I was the sponsor of the bill that was going to convert all the towns. And I did that at the request of the Attorney General.
Yeah.
So I expressed to them my interest in either having this bill, which only applies to Exeter, be shall carry for the Attorney General. And I also expressed that I had no problem with it being shall carry at the state level for all cities and towns. But from what I understand, that's not a solution that they want.
Oh, okay. Thank you for trying.
And again, you're welcome, Representative Walsh. And you know, from what I understand, you know, from what I'm looking at this as, this is a temporary situation. The town of Exeter has actually reviewed prior budget considerations where they've looked at creating a police force. So it's just a matter of time, I think, before we get one. So we're just looking at a stopgap measure here.
Representative Sikorski, a question?
Thank you. I'm just, as you know, questioning. So what happened last year, before Sandy Hook, the city and town bills?
Yes.
Usually they sail through the legislature. So what happened last year? Why didn't it go? Do you know? Or did it come out of committee? Did it not?
House Municipal voted out the version that you have before you. It hit the floor on that night, and many rumors were spread about it at the last minute. It was the last night of the session, yes. But there were many rumors spread about the bill, enough to get the bill recommitted. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you,
Representative Canario.
Thank you. Representative, as it stands right now,
yes,
is Exeter a shall issue?
Yes, it is.
It is.
And they are successfully issuing permits. It's not a question of whether they can do it or not. They are doing it. Okay. They are adhering to the law as it is. But the Exeter Town Council, by this resolution, has asked me to explore possibilities where someone else will have that issuing authority.
So it would take Exeter and put them into a may issue rather than a shall issue. Am I correct?
As written now, that's the only agreement I've gotten so far from the Attorney General's office. But if you will remember the testimony that we heard recently for the bill that was going to apply to the entire state was that the Attorney General already issues 90% of all the permits in the state, and the approval rate at the local level and the Attorney General level is not appreciably different.
I only asked Representative because I didn't want this to turn into a slippery slope type situation, and other towns do the same, become May issues. Thank you.
I understand your concern, Representative Canario, but the licensing requirement is pretty clearly written that if you have a police chief, you're already covered, that you have a mechanism for doing this.
Thank you.
And I'd be very surprised to see any other city or town coming in now and saying, well, we have a police chief, but he's not going to do that. That flies in the face of what's out there.
Representative Martin, a question?
Representative, do you believe it to be true that a town clerk cannot do a federal background check?
I think that the town of Exeter has made a reasonable argument that they would prefer to have somebody above.
That's not my question. My question is, do you believe that they're not able to do a background check?
I think if there was a police official there, they could do a better background check. Let me put it that way.
That's not my
question. I know you're not asking that, and I'm not here to grade the performance of the town clerk. They're doing the best of their ability to the law the way that it's written now.
I'm going to suggest that we seek information elsewhere to answer that question. We can get in touch with the clerk, we can get in touch with the town council and ask how that is being handled right now.
Thanks.
We can answer that question without badgering the sponsor.
Thank you, Madam
Chair. Representative Walsh.
No, I think there are people here that will testify on that. I know because I have heard it already.
Okay. Are there other questions for Representative Valencia? Representative Almeida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, have we have any statement from the state police at all regarding this bill?
I didn't see any.
From the state police.
Last year they didn't want to do it.
And Representative, the state police aren't involved in this in any way, so.
I don't see anything from the state police, Representative Almeida.
Okay, because it says resolved that
there is one.
In a duly qualified state law enforcement official or agency, and I know I've been retired for quite a while, but I always thought the state police took care of Exeter and everybody else. When they call for backup, so why not just call the state police? Since they're riding around up there.
We went that route last year, Representative Almeida.
Okay.
So thank you for your question. But after hearing we only had a few people testifying against the bill, or even for the bill, last year in House Municipal Government. But the takeaway from that was that nobody wanted the state police to be involved. So that's why the language changed from having the state police do it to having the Attorney General do it. So the original bill was written, and it said the Superintendent of the State Police in the town of Exeter. The sub A, I believe the number was 8120 sub A, and that's the bill that passed to the floor last year. That bill specifically said what this one does, which implies the Attorney General.
You've taken my feet, so I appreciate it.
Thanks, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. There are a number of people. In fact, 3 sheets have signed up to testify on 6160. In the interest of comfort, it's a very cool night outside. Probably there are nice breezes and there's still some daylight, but this room is hot with the lights. And with 3 pages signed up to testify, we're going to limit testimony to 1.5 minutes each. Don't feel you have to take the whole 1.5 minutes. If someone has said what you would say, you can say ditto. Representative Costa?
Yes, Madam Chair. A lot of what you see on those pages are people that signed up that are not here. So it actually looks like a lot more to testify than what it is, and I am graciously asking you, a lot of these people have been here since 3, 4 o'clock, if we could go a little more than a minute and a half, because if you look at the written testimony, those 3 pages are going to probably be down to about a page and a half. And I respectfully ask your permission for that.
How many people in the room are wishing to testify?
There's some behind you.
Not many.
Just 2.
How about if we say 2 minutes?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Yes, sir?
My name is Dan Harrison. One of the questions that were just asked of Mr. Valencia, I was asked the Exeter Council.
Could you speak louder, please? I can't hear you.
Are you signed up to testify, sir?
He's going to answer most of your questions.
Why don't you...
Background checks, and I would need more than 2 minutes.
Okay.
I think it's only fair to get everything explained. I was on the council that
We're not...
drafted everything.
Your question time will not eat into your 2 minutes.
Thank you.
So if there are questions from the committee to you, knowing that you're a former councilman, I think we'll probably be able to elicit that information. We have signed up in support of this legislation, and submitting written testimony, Arlene Hicks of the Exeter Town Council. Arlene Hicks is president of the Exeter Town Council. William Monahan, Exeter Town Council. Calvin Ellis, Exeter Town Council. Robert Johnson, Exeter Town Council, all submitting written testimony in favor of the legislation. The committee all will have copies of that written testimony and can look at it. Now we're at another time. Frank DeGregorio, Exeter resident, also submitted written testimony in support of the legislation, as did Harry Arman, an Exeter resident, submitting written testimony. Richard J. August.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Richard J. August. I live in North Kingstown, and therefore I am a neighbor of Exeter, and I have followed this controversy about the CCW process. I'm here for a couple of reasons, one of which is that 6160 appears to be an adjunct to 5993, which Representative Valencia also introduced, which would make the Attorney General the sole authority for issuing concealed carry permits. I had the opportunity about 2 weeks ago to interview the Attorney General and the Chief of Police in North Kingstown on this very subject for the State of the State cable television show. And I think there's a couple or 3 things that came out of that interview that should be of concern not only to the citizens of Exeter but also to the members of this committee. First of all, the distinction between shall issue and may issue is immaterial, because both laws 1147.11 and 1147.18 give the issuing authority, whether it's the police chief or the attorney general, wide discretion in who they issue a permit to. The shall issue is basically the same as the may issue. When I asked the attorney general and the chief of police what criteria they use in deciding when to issue a CCW, they both responded that it is secret or confidential. They didn't want to let it out, which I find passing strange, since when we go, very often gun control advocates will compare motor vehicles to firearms. And when we go to get a license to drive a car, we clearly know what the criteria are, but yet there's some secret process that is in play when CCW applications are filed.